Hello everyone, welcome to this new online talk of Realities in Transition called Modeling the Unseen, the Future of Spatial Experiences in Extended Reality by Paula Strunden. As you know, RIT is an international community that aims at both exploring and supporting alternative XR productions and experimenting new narratives and creative processes. RIT aims at building a strong, independent European XR creative and activist community. For us, it's important to establish XR as a sustainable and inclusive tool for the common good, to support XR creatives and projects, to foster inclusive and sustainable practices for experimental XR creations. So who better than Paula to do this? Paula is a transdisciplinary artist who studied architecture in Vienna, Paris, and London. She completed her design-led PhD within the European Research Network TAC, Communities of Tacit Knowledge, and received the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna Prize for the best research work in 2023-2024 for her dissertation on multisensory perception through extended reality models. Paula, thanks a lot for accepting our invitation today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's very nice. Of course, I don't know all of you personally, but I'm assuming we share many similar topics and themes, and I'm very excited to share to you my design and research work under the title of Modeling the Unseen, the Future of Spatial Experiences in Extended Reality. As Aurelie just introduced myself, I'm a researcher, an extended reality artist, and trained as an architect. And of course, this comprises many different kind of activities. So I don't only sit a lot in front of the computer to like model or draw, but it's a very physical exercise to me, what I do. I go from like doing the research, doing a lot of archival research, into like prototyping, doing a lot of one-to-one building and construction, into working with Unity, like doing like the 3D modeling, animation, and then of course endless testing and trials and like climbing over computers, as we all know. And as Aurelie also just introduced, that I've been doing my PhD, so the majority of the work that I'll show to you today has been developed over the last 4 years within the framework also of a European research project entitled TAC, Communities of Tacit Knowledge, Architecture and its Ways of Knowing. So I think what has been amazing that throughout this I've been actually commuting a lot, like between different places in Europe and getting to know different kind of infrastructures, but mostly being affiliated to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, and also have been doing some research and work and exhibition at the New Institute in Rotterdam. And then now, recently also, one of the work has been exhibited at V2, but like these were kind of the main actors that were involved within the research project. So I prepared a 30-minute presentation for you today, and I think just as like, in a nutshell, the idea of all the things that I'm showing to you is how I explore virtual technologies from an embodied and spatial perspective through the lens of an architectural designer and researcher. And I think what I'd like to start my presentation with is with a little anecdote. So one of my works I'll explain later in more details, which is called Rhetorical Bodies, was exhibited at Muhybrid Arthouse in Eindhoven in 2023. And this is just some screenshots of little WhatsApp messages I received by the people invigilating the experience. So there are two people with these inflatables that are going inside this world to meet each other and to dance together. And then I got these little messages saying, there was this really cute couple. And then on the right, like a few weeks later, I got this information that there was this like woman who came, who was friends with this other woman in the picture, and that they were on this like first date that he arranged for her. And then she writes that they loved the experience so much. She told her that they found each other in your VR world, and after that also in real life. And now they're totally in love. So cute. So I also thought, of course, this is so cute. And the reason why I'm showing this to you today is that I think it's really important to ask this kind of, very big question, why there's so much fuss about virtual worlds not being real when we can experience genuine emotions and sensations within them, such as, feeling in awe or feeling in love or feeling, we all know these things of like being like disgusted or scared or things like, claustrophobic, etc. in virtual reality. So of course, the things that we feel when going into these environments are very real. So what do we do out of that? And I think to give you a bit like an entry point or kind of like a very short teaser on like how I kind of tackle these questions and how I understand virtual and extended reality, I structured the presentation in two parts. So I'd like to quickly speak a bit more about the history of virtual reality that I did a lot of research about throughout my PhD, and then going more into my design and more applied work under the title of Modeling the Unseen. So about the history, I mean, you probably know these images. This is like on the left, you have like the mother of all inventions, like Douglas Engelbart sitting a bit like crouch position in front of a screen, like with a keyboard and mouse interface, and actually interacting with the computer or the screen as we still do today, as we probably also sit now in front of our laptops and screens. And I think what's very often being forgotten that it was the same year, so 1968, in which Even Sutherland actually presented the Sword of Damocles, giving a first kind of example of how you could enter with your full body, with your movement, changing your head position, the digital world, or at least like seeing a cube of it in the real space in front of you. And I think the most exciting thing about this juxtaposition of these two images is that, of course, like this virtual reality setup turns the body into the input device, and which actually turns the whole space around it into the interface. So this makes VR an embodied spatial form of computing. And I think with this kind of premise, the question is a bit like, okay, who has been inventing that? Who has been exploring this? And when we Google like the history of virtual reality, we mostly find a lot of black and white pictures of a lot of male figures from computer science, engineering, that were, kind of mastering these technologies, that developed these devices, and they are also being dubbed like the grandfathers of VR, like Morten Heilig, or the father of VR, like even Sutherland. I don't know, like Godfathers, even Darren Lanier. So there are a lot of these, I mean, terms that also change, of course, but just to say that there are a lot of like male figures as like the kind of inventors of the technology. However, when we look at the development of the content, so some of you might know some of these references, there's a lot of work that was done in like the late 1980s, the early 1990s by people like Brenda Laurel, Monica Fleischmann, Shar Davis. A lot of those also exhibited at Ars Electronica, so for those these names might be familiar, but I think most importantly is that a lot of the actual content development, the question of what we can do with it. So not only how do we build the device, but actually what we use the device for, and what the use of this actually then triggers or allows us to experience, was in that time largely be driven by female pioneers. And these are just some examples. I'm not going to go into detail today, but there's a lot more information about them as well. I would share the references. So there are people like Rebecca Allen, Jacqueline Maury, who also wrote an amazing PhD about her research, Brenda Laurel, who's like the inventor of like a company for computer game for girls, who did the work Placeholder. And there's Shar Davis with Osmosi. And I would just like to show one example. So this is Osmosi from 1994 by Shar Davis. And I think this is an amazing example for this concept of embodied virtuality. So here you see an immersion that puts on West. So like upon like breathing in and out, they basically have a way to navigate the world. So when you breathe in, you rise up in the world. When you breathe out, you kind of, you rise down. So you lift up and you rise down in the world. And what's really amazing about this is that kind of, your real-time bodily, kind of action has a feedback into the virtual world and allows you to navigate the virtual world through that. So Brenda Laurel, who I introduced before, says like in 2018, what frustrates me most is that we learn some shit that some people aren't paying attention to. Today's practitioners are probably not even aware of what was built in the early 90s, mostly by women. So of course, there has been a lot of frustration about the fact that a lot of these works were done. They were very kind of, yeah, radical, experimental. Also, as I said, like more of these kind of more embodied multisensory types of work that are actually being not discussed of as, enough. There's a big lack of knowledge surrounding that. Jacqueline Maury also wrote that she did this in-depth survey and she tried to find these more like artistic, meaningful, very creative virtual reality experience. And of the 100 creations that she found between 1985 and 2006 to 2007, 70% of those creators were women. So the question to me was a bit, okay, what is that kind of knowledge? Like, what do we lack there? Like, how can we actually introduce that more in our practices of designing, of researching about XR today? And so I set out to begin a series of oral histories, interviews with female pioneers, around the globe. So these are just some examples. And next to this podcast that I started interviewing these women, I set up a participatory online platform which is called XR Atlas. So this is xr-atlas.org. So this is online accessible for anybody. And I think this is the idea or the premise of this is to share basically references. So this is a lot of the reference that I've been looking throughout my PhD research, but also that teaching students have been finding. So it is a participatory online platform, so anybody can submit also to this. And the idea is really to kind of gather. It's more like a repository. So as you can see here on the screen recording that you basically, any of these points, you go on, you have a short description, and then once you enter it, you actually find the original links to video recordings, to websites, to, I don't know, interviews, whatever you'd like to submit of the people who have created the work. So it's more to find another entry point and another kind of overview that expands, chronologically, disciplinarily, but also geographically, the idea of what XR means to us. So you will see when you go on the website, also if you go down in time, it extends to, I don't know, frescoes of the Renaissance, and goes a lot through also examples from literature, from film, from theater, from architecture. So to go a bit beyond this kind of mainstream dominant kind of tech narrative coming from Silicon Valley. So this is a very short rush through of the history. And now I'd like to share some more of my design work. So coming to modeling the unseen. And I'd like to ask you to close your eyes for a moment. So after a big day of screen watching for one moment, I'd like to ask you to feel your hands. So take one hand into the other and let them touch each other. Now slowly lower your hands and let them rest on the top of your legs. What is the surface that you feel below your fingers? Which of your fingertips do you need to move to find out? Now slowly move your hands further back to the chair that you're sitting on. How does it feel? What is it made of? What kind of texture does it have? Is it hard? Is it warm or cold? How does it sound when you tap it? Softly. What is below you? What's the surface like beneath your feet? Is there a wall behind you or a window to your side? What do you hear now? If you imagine that the things that your body touches, those things that meet your hands, those that your feet feel, those things that your legs rest on, and those that your ears hear. If you imagine that their surfaces are merely a fragment of a world only you can perceive, what would that world be like? What can you see with your inner eye? Where are you now? So please open your eyes. So yeah, thank you very much for closing your eyes for a moment. I've asked you to do it because I think it introduces really nicely, I think, my main interest in working as a designer and artist with the medium of extended reality. And I'm personally very interested in like the interrelation between our physical and material body with the physical and material objects that we interact with on a daily basis. And with this added medium of virtual reality, what kind of dreamlike, surreal, or fantastical spaces this interaction can then actually trigger, and how these spaces again guide our bodies to act in a certain way. So it is about this kind of feedback loop between these three aspects. And the way how that looks then, so I do design-led research, which means that kind of, my object or like my subject is my object of inquiry, meaning that I work with like, virtual reality headsets and then physical objects that I, move, handle in any kind of way. And through this movement and actions, I actually trigger different kind of virtual responses, which means that in that case, for example, these are like wooden objects, so the weight of this watering can, like the smell of it, like the texture on my hand, they all inform the experience I have in virtual reality. And I think this goes back to an understanding that spatial perception, of course, is inherently multisensory. And this means that, all these different senses actually co-create like our sense of reality. And I think especially in working with XR, what's really interesting that it's not only the classical five senses, so touch, taste, smell, sound, and sight that we can work with, but I mean, everybody who has put on a VR headset knows that for example, the sense of balance plays a huge importance, the sense of gravity plays a huge importance, but also things like, there's like sense of pain, or then also sense of time, chronoception. So, there's apparently up to like 44 different senses, things like sense for illumination. So there's a lot of, different, much more subtle, like sensory kind of, modalities that we can experience, that we strongly physically experience, and that we can combine using these mediums in novel ways to actually learn more about the way how we experience our spatial environment and eventually our reality in the first place. So before I started the PhD, I've been building like a series of installations. So I started in 2016, 17 working with VR, and these were like my first physical installations. So you see they all have bit like a scenographical component. So they're like physical objects or stage sets that are activated by one person at a time, or two people when doing collaborative experience, to have these kind of quite surreal, dreamlike, but always like narrative experience that the person is being guided through. And then throughout like the last 4 years, as I said, I developed 3 installations. So as part of the PhD, I did these performative extended reality models that I call Rhetorical Bodies, Infraton Magic, and Allison's Room, that I'd like to share a bit more of today. And I think the kind of, just the premise of it, or like why I call them extended reality models, is that I'm very interested in this notion of models as being real. So this comes more like from scenography, but also like architecture. So to use the model not as like a iterative or representational model, but actually as like like as a model that creates the reality in itself. And then the second thing is why I work with the term of extended reality. So I'm sure that you all know the kind of taxonomy of mixed reality visual displays from the early 90s. So this idea like where the term of mixed reality came from. And I think I still really, like to work with that, because I think it's really important to understand like the real environment and the virtual environment, not as this kind of like polar opposite, but to really look into it as, but that there's like kind of a form of spectrum or gradient in between them, and that they're all form of like, mixed, mixed moments that can happen in between those two. And I think especially I'm very interested in like the moment, not only like where we push them further apart or understand like them the virtual as some form of escape, or kind of trying to get out of our physical reality, but to think about where they actually converge and where they come together and what happens in those moments where they do. So the hypothesis of my PhD is that when we interact with the virtual physically, so by touching it, by licking it, by tasting it even, that we can learn things about like the digital or virtual space that we would otherwise not be able to perceive. So as I showed you in the beginning, this diagram between body, object, space, throughout my PhD, of course, this became as kind of a bit like a map that helped me to look at multisensory spatial perception from these three different angles, always focusing or putting into light like one different or like a few different sensory modalities, and then looking from the perspective of those. And I think, so what I'd like to do is like for each of them to just like quickly go through like basically the making of the installation. I will run through it a bit faster, and then I'm happy to come back to any of it if you have any questions, maybe where you're interested. So the first one is Infrared Magic. It's an extended reality ceremony that was exhibited in Austria in the Museum of Modern Art in Salzburg, and in Vienna at Exhibit Gallery. And here, this is basically an initiation ceremony that takes you to a very kind of surreal, dreamlike space based on the notion of inframens from Marcel Duchamp. And I worked a lot for this experience with like ritual practices and ceremonial object, looking also at like alchemical practices or forms of magic and like more like natural science, and trying to to think about like this kind of mixed or extended realm as something that we are yet or to discover and to really experience. These are sketches from like the making of, thinking about how this ritual experience could unfold, like what are like the physical interaction, how does the space is designed, like how does the stage, so how does this ritual kind of take place. And then these are images from the exhibition where you see people like repositioning their bodies, handling these objects, and getting introduced into the space between physical and virtual reality. So these are just some screen grabs. I mean, I didn't really put any kind of trailers into this presentation, but I'm happy to share the Vimeo link, so you find all of those also online. Basically here what you see is the moment the person lies down, so it always everything relates on like your physical repositioning in the space, that like the whole kind of environment explodes and you're being taken into this like 40-meter deep tower below the building. It was initially exhibited at the Academy of Fine Arts. You kind of go through it to then be taken on a journey below it, where you get to eat and drink and speak and go through all these little rituals basically. So these are just images that of each of the worlds. So you see that in my work, like the architectural design or kind of the world building plays a very big importance, and I think much more than the actual like materialization of it. So it is, most of my experience are they have like a very strong aesthetic consistency, but they are not all, I mean, they're not photorealistic at all. For example, Infrared Magic is a pure black and white experience. And then like for the physical setup or like the way how it's being guided. So in all my experiences, the role of the invigilator plays a very key role. So they're like performers or actors. So they're not like changing random volunteers. This has been like a fight with curators for the last 6 years. Of course, is a big cost, but I do really believe that this is like the most important part of any experience. So I think it's, I don't know, it makes like half of the experience of the people visiting it is who this person is, how well they know it, how they guide you through it. And in order to give them this importance, I've always been designing these a bit like kind of little spirit animals or like guides that they actually hold and interact with in real time with the person being immersed. So here you see, for example, there's this little raven that is attached to the controller that is speaking to the person inside. And then there are always these moments where you kind of like dip in and out into the experience. So you have a lot of moments where you also view out of it or you interact. Like here, for example, you're being fed by the invigilator. And I think all these options to kind of, to to diffuse or break, or like kind of the expectation of what the one or the other is very helpful for these experiences. And then I think for Infrared and Magic was very beautiful that in the end, like through this really strong invisualization, it really creates an architecture, also like an extended reality world where like themes of care, themes of trust, themes of like empathy, like both towards the person inside, but also in interaction with the objects, become very key and really are at the center of these installations in the end. And then, of course, also the physical design. So this is from the setup at the Museum of Modern Art in Salzburg. So I think also very important to me is that there are all these different components so that these pieces can really stand as like standalone installations. So there's like a sculptural aspect, the physical installation, but then of course there's a lot of drawings and sketches from the design process. And then there are also large scale prints of the world. So to me, always very important is that these works can also function as when not being activated, or kind of give like a premise of what there ought to be shown. So the second one that was shown at Ars Electronica as well and exhibited in the Netherlands a lot is Allison's Room, an XR archive. So this is a reconstruction of an archival space of a British architect called Alison Smithson's. So here, by following a little cat called Serafina, you basically go through different of her worlds, like workspaces and also designs of the Smithsons. And again, like this all started from one color photography, actually. So there's always this kind of starting point or side, and then a lot of, quite like speculative narrative world building that then creates like these experiences around it. This is kind of like, prototyping, like in my studio in Amsterdam, not yet colored. It was a big decision which color to get, but you see it really is a bit like being inside a one-to-one model. And then again, like the world around it is quite like at points black and white, and then other parts are more, more, I think like all the plants and everything is more photorealistic, and that this experience. Here, the spatial narrative, played a very big role. So how to design, basically there are 7 or 8 spaces that are overlaying like the same physical infrastructure, and how you can like seamlessly go from one to the other without actually bumping into anything. So whatever you do in that space, so you have all these little red elements. So whatever you touch, wherever you go, like whether you sit down on a table or you touch a folder or you climb through the chimney, a different space will unfold, and you follow that quite intuitively. So from touching a painting to like playing a harp, basically each of these things allows you to transition between the virtual environments. So at the core, basically you have a person that's being guided by a little cat, Serafina, that's being pulled around by the invigilator, that then goes freely in their own time through this whole narrative. And I think like this game between the invigilator and the immersed, of course, is also quite enjoyable to watch. So people are quite drawn by the spectacle of those two without even having to go inside. And then these are just some screenshots from the 3D model just to show how like all these worlds are overlaying the same infrastructure. I'm not going to go into that too deeply, but just to show you, I think that, like kind of there's a very strong like architectural kind of planning component, like to make these like worlds within worlds possible. And then, as I just said, I think this game between like the invigilator and the immersion is very much at the core of the work. And this also then brought me to the kind of last of the 3 case studies I'd like to show, which is rhetorical bodies. So this is the one where I shared the anecdote from at the beginning. So here, this was exhibited at Mühaidt Art House also in Eindhoven, and then this year also at V2 in Rotterdam. So you have 2 people who enter the experience simultaneously and who get to meet each other in the virtual world as like a blob. And what's very special about this experience is that each of your body parts is being tracked, and being tracked, I mean that like your movement are actually translated in real time into sounds. So the way how you move, how fast you move, which of your body parts you move creates different sounds, like adjust the volume and the pitch. So your whole body becomes a bit like an embodied synthesizer. So you become like a musical instrument that creates the sound in real time. And then you get to meet somebody else. So the person that is kind of has the sound on the loudspeaker. Usually I work with professional dancers as well, so it becomes quite like a kind of theatrical piece to watch as well. And then you have like another person kind of going in and out, but it could be anybody. Like it's very open, anybody can go in. It's very playful as well. You can also have several people working with sharing a body, for example. And I've been running loads of workshops throughout the last years surrounding this idea of creating like a digital or virtual body or like a common body. And I just like to show you some last images also of what that means to also work with bigger groups. So I think, of course, as part of the design work, a lot of the testing and prototyping is actually happening through teaching. So I do like summer schools and courses, but also a lot of workshops. And this was at the Universität der Künste in Berlin together with the HZT. So this was really nice because we combined professional dance students with artists. So like both students, but I think to work very interdisciplinarily, and then also so they kind of shared one body, so they each became one body part. And instead of like being yourself an instrument, they really did a lot of exercises on like deep listening, like following each other. So I kind of created a choreography through their movements, through sound that was in space. So I think what's really beautiful about this is that at some point there's no headset needed anymore for each of them to be very present within the same environment, to be very aware of the virtual space surrounding them. So depending on where they went, of course, they would trigger sounds, they would hear each other, they would be able to control the sounds through their movements. So there was a very strong kind of, like spatial, like virtual presence throughout needing to wear a headset or to understand that. And there's like 4 or 5 quotes I'd just like to share from basically the reflections that I got. Like, so throughout the last 4 years, I was collecting a lot, like, okay, what do people feel? What do they experience? Like, I think coming back a bit like to this very first question that I started the talk with. So what is it that we really experience there? Like, why is it important to create this experience? What is the actual kind of, like potential of working with this medium? Like, where can it become transformative? And I think my findings, so of course it lies a lot within like kind of the very individual, like very subjective kind of responses that people have on like going through these experiences. And these are just a few quotes I'd like to read. So it has been described that it has created a deep sense of connection, an invisible pact between all involved, a symbiotic relationship where my action influenced the virtual space, the opening of a space within or below my mind, 2 distinct kind of spaces, although they kind of interweave, one that opened my mind and one that opened my body, and a space that I did not know exist, but now never want to miss. So I think what I ended my PhD with is going through all these reflections. So I have around like, I don't know, thousands of these reflection cards, and really like analyzing them and thinking about, okay, what is the kind of, the added value that we can deduct from doing these, quite experimental works. And I've been reading a lot about like, kind of general cognition. So the way how we think, how we memorize, like how we structure our thoughts, how we rationalize. And it is kind of like state of the art that there's an embodied component to it, which means that, of course, our body play a very important role in understanding our reality and world. It has an enacted component, which means that the way of how we use our body, how we interact with the objects in our environments plays a role in it. There's a strong embedded component, which means like how everything is, how our world or like ourselves is being contextualized and situated in social, political, economical setup. So kind of how it's being embedded within like its society. And then there's also this 4th point, which is quite new. It's like the extended component, which means that we can also extend parts of our cognition and outsource them to other people. Let's say, I don't know, like the memory of a phone number, or like how we rely on our partner in knowing certain things that we then don't have to have in our own heads, etc. And then my proposal for the PhD is that there's actually a 5th component, which is that also our cognition is enveloped. And I think this is something that is very exciting to explore through this medium of extended reality, because it really allows us to to feel or to get like a first sense or a bit like a teaser that there is a spatial or like a spatio-temporal component that really strongly structures our way of thinking, our way of rationalizing, our way of memorizing. That is usually because like, yeah, living on earthly, on Earth, like under like physical laws that ruling Earth, like not very easy to perceive. But with this experience, we can really, yeah, we can dehabituate our senses, we can question that, we can like challenge and provoke that. And there is some form of, yeah, like knowledge that actually yeah, allows us to give us a sense of how these, yeah, I think like, yeah, space in itself can actually have such a strong impact of how we feel and where we feel being in the world and how we position ourselves. So I think that this potential of these like extended reality models is really like a potential to explore these like spatial practices and spatial, yeah, as I said in the beginning, this idea of like embodied spatial perception. And I think what's really exciting about it, and I think also, yeah, where it's so amazing, like the project that you do, is that it's highly interdisciplinary, taps into so many different fields. And I think this is a bit where, yeah, within my research, like I kind of position the core of XR, but I'm very aware that it could also be positioned like at any other point. So I think that's a bit the beauty of the medium. And then just as an outlook, so I'm currently working on two new installation, more like large scale extended reality pieces. One about creating the powers of 10 into an XR installation, and one more about creating like a domestic world that's more about generating space from AI called Mirror Worlds. So as I said, yeah, these are the links. So there's a link to the XR Atlas, and then also, yeah, to the Vimeo on the website. And yeah, happy, of course, to share also anything if you're interested in something more particular. And then, of course, the, yeah, cultural institutions, like the individuals that have been powered, like, yeah, supervision. So these are all the important credits here at the end of the project that I shared. Thank you so much for your time and attention.